Welcome to Multifamily Grit, where we share the pros and cons and the celebrations and struggles of the most important industry in the U.S., multifamily property management, where we manage millions of apartment homes for over 100 million U.S. residents every day. Today's episode is about multifamily staffing struggles, finding, hiring, training, and placing the right people in the right places. And today, we are sponsored by Fortress OS, the only core property management operating system built exclusively for today's affordable operators. Are you ready for your applicants, leasing agents, and compliance team to love the software they work in and the job they do every day? Fortress revolutionizes affordable management and reduces applicant move-in time to save money, generate more cash, and help your teams create more success. If you like what you hear today, please like and subscribe. So today, I am joined by Stephanie Lehman, one of my mentors in this industry. She's taught me so much, and it's not just as much about what she's taught me as it is about how she's taught me. You'll pick up on this energy really quickly as she starts talking, and we can enjoy her direct, candid, and focused thoughts. So, Stephanie, thank you so much for being here today as actually our first guest.
Thank you.
I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about how you got started in multifamily.
Sure. And thank you for the compliment, Kerri. You're a big mentor of mine as well. So I got started in the industry. I'll date myself or age myself. Probably 25 years ago when in college I decided to work on site as a leasing consultant and thought it was going to be so easy. And then you deal with people wanting a home and you deal with crazy people wanting a home and great people wanting a home and, learning how to handle all those people. And then the disappointments when the team doesn't deliver the home when you're ready to move them in. And after college, I had a brief stint in medical sales, and it was what everybody wanted to do back then, and it bored me out of my mind. So I got back onto the property management side, but from a capital standpoint, doing acquisitions and dispositions, and that as well bored me. So I was fortunate enough to be hired as an asset manager for a private equity real estate firm here in Nashville, and that's when I found what I love, what I do, and I did that for 10 years and then came to Elmington almost 9 years ago. So I've been in it a long time.
Yeah.
I like to say I was maybe 12 when I started.
Yeah, clearly. Same. I can't tell you how much that means to me to hear you say that you look at me in the same way I do you. I have to tell you, when you first started at Elmington, and I had been in the role for 2 years, I still felt like I knew nothing about multifamily just because the industry is, I really feel like it's like behind this private curtain. You don't really know what goes on in multifamily. And then when you're exposed to it, you're like, shit, there's so much. There's so much. And when you first joined the Elmington team, and I had been there for about 2 years, and you knew everything, it felt like you knew everything about how the industry operated, what created success, what the struggles were. And you were so passionate about it that you were never afraid to tell people like what was going right and what was going wrong. And I loved that so much. And I just feel like I learned so much from you so quickly. And I mentioned in the beginning, it's not just about what I learned, but it's about how I learned it. Like, you are a huge reason why I am so confident in my ability as a female executive to say like what I want, what I need, what the company needs when I need it, because I didn't have that before you. You taught me so much, truly you did. So I can't.
Not everybody loves hearing my direct opinion.
No, not everybody loves hearing mine either. but I do feel like it gets things done.
Mm-hmm. It does.
Things get accomplished.
It does.
So
I would say I did know a lot. I love one of the things I tell people all the time when I'm hiring, and if they say, our niche is affordable housing development, and so I knew nothing about affordable housing when I started at Elmington. And one of the guys asked me, they're like, "We're so well occupied, but we're not making any money." And so I went in and dug into the balance sheets and was like, "Okay, well, here's one of our big problems." And then I looked at all the rent rolls, and I thought I was such a genius because I was like, y'all haven't raised your rents in 6 months, and you're 100% occupied, 100% leased. Like, we can raise these rents $250, and we are going to make so much money. People aren't, some people are going to move out, but it's fine. We'll get new people in. And Hunter said, we can't raise rents. And I was like, well, that's a bad business plan. And then I learned about affordable housing.
Yes.
So I may have looked like I knew everything, but there was a lot to learn, and there still is.
Yes. There's so much to learn. But I love the energy that you brought to it, where it was like, we're going to figure this out. And so what does your role look like today at Elmington? What are you responsible for?
It's grown a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm I'm now the executive vice president of asset management. So I oversee the asset management of all of our owned assets. So that includes affordable housing assets and our Elmington residential single family for rent. With that, I also do all the design of all of our assets. And so I'm a little particular. Um, so I really get to see the properties from the beginning. Once the guys have found a piece of land, then I start working with Kerri and the architects, and we build it, and then it's handed off, or we build the design, and then it's handed off, and EC builds it, and then I still get involved, whether they like it or not. And then they start turning it over to me and my lease-up team. So I oversee the lease-up of the properties, and then that moves to the stabilized. So I really get to see the asset from like the true whole life of the asset. Recently, we've kind of, because I like things a particular way, we've streamlined so that for the property management folks that oversee my assets, they only have my assets. So I have a stabilized team and a lease-up team. And it's hard to answer to two masters of a ownership of a Elmington owned asset and then third party clients. So we kind of brought that all underneath me. So we kind of all have one vision, and it actually flows through my organization, as you would call it, and then my asset managers are involved with it from really from lease up to stabilized and through that life cycle.
Yeah, I love that it's such a continuous life cycle where you're involved in the actual design of the asset, so that then when the leasing consultants and the lease up team is leasing the asset, leasing the units, you know how to describe to them the value of the unit because you built the value of the unit and of the property. So I think it's just genius. And I know that your skills on the front end of designing the asset are just so valuable, and the products that you guys create are just so beautiful. But that's probably the easier part of your job, would be my guess. So when you and I chatted about this episode and what we were going to be talking about today, we talked a lot about staffing. So that's forefront of your mind right now. So tell me about that.
It is so hard to hire people. I think it's been a challenge to hire people, for years. You got to hire the right person. I have high expectations, so they have to have high expectations of themselves. Yeah. But I really think we saw a shift in the American worker coming out of 2020. Whatever you believe, people got to sit on their couch and didn't have to work. And now we are still seeing the effects of that because people don't want to work hard. And hiring is such a challenge. The pay rate that we've seen increased, 2018, I could pay a maintenance supervisor, HVAC certified, $20 an hour. They're now asking $35, $38 an hour. And it's a guess if they'll show up every day.
Yeah.
People show up to interviews not prepared, laying on their couch, laying in their bed.
On an interview?
On an interview. And then you finally find the right candidate, and then they ghost you. They don't show up for the first day of work. That's not every single one of them, but we have probably at least 20 open positions right now, just at the property level. And then I have some open positions that I'm trying to hire for in the corporate office. And we're just not seeing people that want to work and that want to work in person, not even 5 days a week, 3 days a week. I had an interview last week, and I was just, the camera popped up, and this guy he's interviewing for a director level position, and he was not professional at all. And after the interview, one of the ladies that works for me said, "That was a short interview." I said, "That was a long interview."
I love it. I love it. I have to go back to this for a minute. Actually, two things. First, you have 20 open positions right now. Mm-hmm. How many total on-site team members do you have in your department?
Oh gosh. We have 45 properties. I would say an average of 3 team members per site.
Okay.
So was that 120?
Yeah, and then 20 vacancies. So you're in the range of 15 to 20%.
Right.
Open positions, which is absolutely incredible.
And then that goes from groundskeeper to community director.
Okay. That's tough. And then you're interviewing people who are laying in bed.
Laying in bed.
Interview.
Yeah.
That would be a short interview for me.
It was very, I was like, any of those, it's very short.
Yes, yes, I couldn't agree more. I've actually had interviews where someone has come into the office and we sat down and started chatting, and the ones that actually one in particular that really comes to mind, someone was so arrogant. Like, he was so arrogant about everything that he did, and it was just so clear it wasn't going to be a culture fit. And so this was back before I was very honest with people, and I just made something up. I was like, oh my gosh, something just happened. I have to go deal with it. We'll have to reschedule. I did not reschedule. But now to today, when I have those sort of interviews and I'm just like, this is not going to work, I essentially do that in the
Mhm.
moment. I'm like, unfortunately, just based on this conversation, I can tell this isn't going to be a good fit. So just wrap this
Yeah.
up, not waste any more of each other's time. But it's
Yeah.
tough.
I did that once, and the girl called our HR department on me.
Like, what are you going to do?
I was
You don't
like,
work here.
yeah, exactly. And I was like, I was honest with you. Like,
Yeah.
you couldn't answer my first 3 questions, and you were very unprofessional and combative. So I ended the interview. And you called HR on me. I've never had HR called on me. That
I
know
wish I
of.
could say the same.
That I know of.
I'm sure I have. So how do you guys go about? So obviously, you need more candidates,
Mhm.
and you need more team members. So you need a bigger pool of candidates to hire from. Where are you finding people?
So we actually have a new recruiting department. So we'll hopefully see some improvement there. But
Yeah.
I know they post on Indeed. I end up sharing on my LinkedIn. I can't share every position on my LinkedIn, but the big ones, or if they've kind of gone open for a long time, I share on my LinkedIn. If I can figure out how to share on Facebook, I do. That usually takes quite a few tries and me calling my 21-year-old sister. I wouldn't even think about sharing it on Instagram. But and then I try to do word of mouth. I feel like internally we've really elevated everyone we can at this point.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm looking to do is better training and coaching and over the course of the job so that we can set people up for elevating them, easier than you take a risk with anything, but you really take a risk with somebody from outside the organization. And then I've started posting some jobs myself
Yeah.
just to see if it gets more.
Yeah.
I feel like I've run out of all my resources. I've either hired or passed on all the people I've known over my career here. So now it's like taking a chance on new people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. When you go through the hiring process, do you have like a very structured interview process or like plan or staged interviews?
So I let the recruiting department do a pre-screening.
Yeah.
And then we have the first interview. Depends on the position. If it's an on-site position, then I don't always interview those, but I do want to on specific ones. And so what I let the hiring manager get through their process. And when they've kind of found 2 to 3 candidates for the job, then they bring them to me. And a lot of them fall apart when it's time to talk to me. But I guess, that's good to see it then.
Yeah.
Then once they're hired. And then if it's a position that I'm specifically hiring for, I let the HR team pre-screen or the recruiting team pre-screen. And then I like to do a 30-minute video interview. If we're good after that, then I want to bring them into the office, do a little bit longer, and let them meet the team.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten to that second part yet.
Yeah.
On anything.
You know what I heard the other day? I was actually listening to an audiobook. I can't remember which book. It might have been Who, but anyway, I can't remember the book. That mentioned leveraging group interviewing processes to help identify really great candidates. So the thought process is that, let's say you're trying to hire a leasing consultant and your HR department pre-screens like 4 leasing consultants. You take those 4 leasing consultants and put them in one interview session with you and maybe the regional.
Yeah.
And you spend the first part of that, let's say 30-minute interview. The first part, you're just sharing the details of the job and like expectations, but that way you only have to do it once. So you're not doing it 4 times. And then the second part is asking like 3 or 4 questions of each of those 4 candidates. And you ask a question and let them each respond. And then you watch how they respond to each other. So in like a Zoom setting, so you can see like how they are
competitive.
Yes, like if they're competitive or if they're nice or what. Anyway,
Yeah.
because you can read so much through like a person's facial expressions when they're watching someone else
You don't say.
respond. Yes, you and I don't have that problem.
Not at all.
No, great poker
Very
faces over
stoic.
here. Yeah. um. So anyway, I just thought that was really
Yeah, that's
interesting. I haven't
interesting.
done it yet, but
That's
I don't
really
know.
interesting
Yeah.
because obviously in certain positions you want that competitiveness,
Mhm.
but you also want to see someone's personality when they're tested,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
So that would be an interesting way to do it.
Yeah, it would. Although I loved you bringing up the competitive nature. It's almost like now I can see doing that same sort of structure, but now having like some sort of a game in it where
Hmm.
you like challenge the competitor, the
The
interview
interview
candidates.
who
to-
need to be competitors.
yes. To sort of like a quick competition.
Yeah,
Anyway, it would be interesting
yeah,
to see that.
yeah. It would.
I don't know. I'm always trying to figure out how to make interviewing more efficient because it just I feel like so many managers and leaders don't see hiring as our jobs, right? Like we have our jobs and then we
Right.
have to hire. And having great team members is a huge part of our job. But
Hmm.
like hiring doesn't, none of us are trained to hire people.
It's so true.
It's not a skill set. It's not
Right.
something I would ever write down on my resume. Like I'm great at hiring people.
Right.
I would say I'm great at leading people and coaching people, but not
Hmm.
hiring. So like we don't see ourselves as great hirers. So it's like, how do we make that process more efficient and almost gamify it so we can then turn around tomorrow and say, I am
I'm
great at
great at hiring.
hiring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's so true because you can be a great leader, but if you don't have the right
Yeah.
people to
Yeah.
lead,
Yeah.
I mean, and by not having those right people, it puts more on either you or another
Yes.
team member that you have. And um, I, so I was hiring recently for some compliance specialists, and I will admittedly say I am not a compliance expert,
Yeah.
but I'm big on your personality and are you going to fit within our team? And
Mhm.
so um, I did like a 2-part interview. I had a couple of the people that are on my team that I trust and know that they are compliance experts. So I had them interview from like that skill set.
Yeah.
Don't worry about their personality. I mean, you're going to be working with them, so I want you to have that in the back of your mind. But I really want you to test them,
Mhm.
and how do they respond to that testing? How do they answer? Like, are they good at it? Do they know what they're doing? But also, what's their response to you testing them?
Yeah.
And then I'll interview them on like the personality and will they be a fit on our team? And I think that worked well because I wasn't. I mean, they could have told me anything.
Yeah.
I could have been like, "Are you a HUD expert?" And they could have said yes and given me an example, and I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But the other 2 ladies were able to say, "This one really knows it. You probably want to pass on this one." And then I could say, "All right, this personality feels like it's going to fit well with ours. This
Mhm.
lady seems a little too not urgent, slow,
Yeah.
boring. No one's going to like, she may know the skills very well, but I'm also big on like how's the team going to work together?" And I
Yeah.
think that adds a difficultiness to hiring because that is important to me. I mean,
Yeah.
as you know, Elmington's culture is not the norm.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to hire somebody that I don't think is going to fit in it.
Yeah, absolutely. We like to say that a lot of times during the hiring process at Fortress and also at Elmington Property Management when I was there, we almost tried to scare people out of the position. Like just being so overly honest about who we are, that we are like competitive, that we are like incredibly driven and fast paced and those sorts of things. And even to the point where we even like to say at Fortress, like we really are a team of overachievers.
Mhm.
So if you're an underachiever and we make the mistake of hiring you, your underachieving nature will be on full display very quickly and you're going to hate it here. Like the team's going to make you miserable
Yeah.
because they expect overachievers and
Yeah.
they're going to treat underachievers like they don't belong here. So just make sure like you need to be betting on yourself right now and you need to know who you are
Yeah.
and that you're capable of this before you join our team.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I always tell people I have really high expectations of
Yeah.
myself and of my team.
Yeah.
And, when I'm hiring a community director candidate and they're coming into a mess, I pull up Fortress and go through the numbers. And I'm
Yeah.
like, here's the applications or the lack of. Here's our occupancy, here's our pre-leasing, here's our delinquency. I mean, I literally like screen share and say, this is what you're walking into.
Yeah.
First of all, I want you to tell me, can you walk into this? Now I want you to tell me your 30-day, like your first 30 days, what do they look like?
Yeah.
And I'll challenge them during that interview because I'm going to be challenging them once I hire them.
Yep.
So let's get it all on the table right now.
Yes. I love that so much. Like that direct, just candid analysis of like what and presentation of what the position's going to look like, what this relationship is going to look
Right.
like.
That's why it always surprises me when someone leaves. It doesn't surprise me when they leave. But when their comment is, I didn't know what I was walking into. And I'm like, oh, no. You did. You just didn't want to, you don't want to admit it now, or you weren't truthful in the interview and said you can handle this. And that's on you because I shared my screen. I told you the mess you were walking into.
Yeah.
Or if it's a lease up, I'm telling you like my expectations, 30 days and 90 days. Yep. Here's the number that it takes. Here's when you need to start doing it. And, here's how quickly it has to turn around. Like this doesn't come to you day one. This comes to you during the interview process.
Yeah. I love that so much. And I actually want to go back to something that you brought up early on that you just mentioned right now. So the lease up process. You have two different divisions that run underneath you, lease up and stabilized. I would say that it's not super common to treat them as completely different divisions, which you've done. I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So a person that can be in lease up and thrive in lease up is going to be so bored on the stabilized world.
Yeah.
But a great stabilized manager, a leasing consultant, assistant manager, even, the maintenance team is going to be very overwhelmed in the lease up world. And so it's really two different skill sets that have to also have a lot of the same property management knowledge. So the lease up world should be fast and furious. I really want these buildings occupied 30 days after CO.
Yeah.
Depending on the time of year or the market, it doesn't happen a lot of times, especially when we go into a new market because we've got to find our group.
Yeah.
But we've done it over and over again. And so if you are slow and methodical, you need to be on the stabilized side.
Yep.
If you are, a salesperson and have a lot of energy and highly organized, the lease up world's probably better for you. And so it's tough because I've got a couple of lease up managers right now that I think, they really would be great in the stabilized world, but I don't have a spot for them.
Yeah.
But they're really floundering over here. So I've got to do something. And then I've got a couple of them that their properties are close to stabilized, and I'm starting to talk to them of like, what do you want to do after this? Because I don't want to lose you, but I think you're going to be bored. I really think that, it's like you put a salesperson in an administrative job. What property management does all the time, they take a superstar leasing consultant, and the promotion is to assistant manager, which is a totally different skill set. They're not successful. They may be making a little bit more money, but actually, really, they probably aren't because they're not making the commissions. But now they're really behind a closed door on admin duty, but they're someone that should be, front-facing selling. Yeah. And that's what's also wrong with the property management world is our kind of ladder up is you really need to have kind of a sales ladder and an admin ladder. Yeah. So that went completely off of the lease up and stabilized, but it's kind of the same thing because I have one particular property manager in mind, and I'm like having those conversations, knowing she'll leave once her property stabilized. She thinks she wants to stay at that property because she's filled it up. She's spent all of her time there, a lot of hard work, and she knows the residents. But I know
You've seen
her.
It.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that actually where you went with that is exactly what I was wanting to get at because I love the way you do that, the way you think about the different culture and the different mindset of those two different buckets of properties. The difference between stabilized and lease up is so intense. I mean, just the culture on site is so different. And separating those out into those two different types of people, I think, is really so smart because, as you know, the industry is abuzz with this word centralization. And we use that word to mean a lot of different things. And I'm not knocking the word. I actually think it's a great concept, but we use it to mean a lot of different things without really getting specific on it. And I think what you have done is a version of that. But I actually prefer the word specialization to centralization. And you've created specialized buckets of lease up, like high volume, high activity, intensity, competition versus the stabilized assets, which are methodical, analytical, long-term, like just two very different worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've done it all the way up to the RVP level.
Yeah.
You know,
so unique.
They all know each other.
Yeah.
our transitions, they work together when a property is transitioning, but from lease up to stabilized, but they're not it's two different lines.
Yeah, I think it's so unique, and I just have so much respect for it. I think what you're doing is phenomenal. And I want to ask, because you and I talked about this a little bit, are there any other areas where you're trying to create specialization and maybe take some of the responsibilities off of the on-site team and bring them in?
So yes and no. I mean, I've kind of brought my own. Well, I have brought my own compliance team. And so I have a lease up compliance team and a stabilized compliance team.
Yeah.
And I did bring in a director for those. Actually, was able to elevate somebody, which was very exciting.
Yeah.
And again, it's the lease up is. I mean, they're turning 50 files a day.
Yeah.
The stabilized is turning 15 files a day on the move-in side. And so again, it's finding that skill set, and the ones that are working on the lease up files probably wish they were working on the stabilized some days.
Yeah.
But they'd be bored over there.
Yep.
And so also trying to get one thing we're doing right now is I have the senior compliance specialist on the lease up side. We're calling it her world tour. She's going to all of the lease-up properties and training the staffs on how to put a file together better.
Yeah.
Because that whole process is so antiquated, and it's mind-blowing how long and tedious it is. They could spend 2 to 3 hours with an applicant and still need more information.
Yeah.
But if they don't know how to put the file together, and this check stub leads to these 5 more things that we need, hopefully they'll know it from the beginning. And so by having the compliance specialists work really hand on hand with the on-site teams, it's hopefully creating less turnaround on the files, and a better experience for everybody, not just the teams, but the applicant as well, because there's a lot of anxiety when you're applying for especially a new development. You're so worried that you're going to miss out on your apartment. And so, I mean, I've seen people crying because they're frustrated because there's documents that we have to have. It's a state regulation that we have to have them, but they're worried that they can't get them, and the other 5 people in their office that are in the office at the same time filling out an application are going to get them ahead of them. And then I've also been on site at the wonderful time when people move in and they're crying because they actually got the apartment. But so trying to get compliance and on-site to work better together, which I think is also something new from what I've seen in my 9 years of affordable housing, is it's always a finger-pointing game between on-site and compliance. And I'm very adamant about taking that away, bringing them together. Later this week, we have our Lease Up Summer Summit, and they'll all be together. It's not just the property managers. It's the property managers, the regional managers, and the compliance team, so that they really form a relationship and want to work together.
Yeah. Oh, I think that strategy of bringing everyone together and focused on the same goal rather than that finger pointing, which we've seen happen so often, is so important. And going back to what you said about even having separate compliance divisions, so lease up versus stabilized, it's so important. And that, like you said, there are probably some days where the lease up compliance specialists are like, dang, I'd really like that job. I have to ask, are you reading or have you read Elon Musk's biography by Walter Isaacson?
Not yet.
Okay.
It's on my list.
I feel like I'm talking to everybody about this right now, not because I think Elon Musk is a phenomenal human necessarily, but
he's a phenomenon. That's for sure.
That's a great way to put it. Thank you. When Walter Isaacson was writing this biography, he actually interviewed a lot of people who worked directly for Elon Musk and would say, and I know that the same thing was said about Steve Jobs, was that the time spent working for those men in that level of intensity was some of the most rewarding, valuable times of their lives, but they could only sustain it for so long. So I think even knowing that in our team members, there are specific positions that we'll put people into that we ask them to perform under intense amounts of pressure and long work periods. Like when we were building Fortress, I had a team that was working 12, 16-hour days with me for weeks at a time without any days off, no weekends off even. But that's not sustainable for anyone's lifetime, right? So you put in the energy, but you have to be really aware of what that's causing, and then whether or not you need new or different people, or you need to find a way to create a more sustainable path forward. So I think understanding that with your teams is so valuable.
Yeah. When we started the lease up team, the intent was there'd be 3 to 4 lease ups at a time, and they'd be max 6 months from start to finish. We currently have 10 lease ups. Some of them have been because of delivery and no hit to the GC. But, I have one that delivered its first building in January of 2023 and delivered its last building in January in 2024. So this is an 18-month lease up at this point.
Yeah.
Add to that, there's 9 more, and there's 2 more coming on later this summer. So I realized maybe a little too late, and I'll admit that's too much for one person to lead. And so I brought somebody else in about a month ago for him to kind of focus on the operations, not to mean that he doesn't focus on the leasing as well, but really because the intent at the beginning was that there wouldn't really be a lot of operations. It would be leasing, and then by the operations really kick in by the time we're done.
Yep.
And that's not been the case the last year.
Yeah.
And so we have one gentleman that runs the sales, the marketing, the driving the goals, breaking down the numbers on leasing every day and the applications, and really watching that pipeline and fortress. I mean, he's nonstop talking about the pipeline. And then another gentleman that really is focusing on, hey, we're running the operations as well.
Yeah.
We have people living here. We have a set of books now. And so, we have maintenance. Most of it's warranty stuff, but you still got to manage it. And that's, it's only been 30 days. But I am seeing kind of really a relief from the teams because they're getting a lot of different management. Some of them are responding well. I have a few that aren't responding well. And we'll go back to the hiring process. Yeah. But I think that's going to be a good shift for better, and a better property to transition.
Yeah. Oh, I love this story because you're really doubling down on this specialization. And if you think about it, it's been one of the cornerstones of frustration in property management for me that the assets are so decentralized that you expect a team of, let's say on a 300 unit community, a team of 3 people who are actually in the office doing the work, 3 or 4, to handle everything. Sales,
a multi-million-dollar business.
Yes. And everything that a multi-million-dollar business would be doing.
Right.
Sales, marketing, hiring, firing, abiding by fair housing laws, making sure that you're managing lease renewals and collections and customer service and facilities management. I mean, and you're asking 3 people in the office to essentially manage that whole process. And it's insanely difficult. So the way that you're creating this specialization and you're doubling down on it in so many ways is, I think, really innovative.
Yeah, I think, time will tell, but I'm excited about what it's going to show.
Yeah.
We've hired across both lines. We call them operations specialists. They're not essentially a community director. They have the community director skill set, but they have a little bit more. And so they're floating, and they're going. I have 2 on the stabilized side and 1 on the lease up side, and they just float around the properties to give that support because, like you said, you have 3 people hiring or running a multi-million-dollar business, and they've never run a business before.
Yeah.
And so, really trying to give that support it's only on our team. Other property management companies do it, and the EPM on the third-party side, I believe, does it as well. I hope they will. But these are focused on our team, so they have the same goals. They have the same objectives. It's the same story every single time. Like this problem may be different than the property they were at last week, but the ultimate goal is the same. And hopefully, that's something that we'll see a big improvement on as well.
Yeah.
And hopefully help the teams feel more supportive. And maybe it's somebody more at their level than a regional manager where they may say, like, I don't know how to do this, but they're afraid to say that to their boss.
Yeah. Like I said, I just think the methodology that you're using is so innovative and so thoughtful. And what I love so much is that you're doing it in affordable, which is really tends to be the asset class that a lot of people just kind of shy away from, right? It's hard.
It is. There's such a low supply and high demand that professionalism and customer service is not there.
Yeah.
I remember when we were doing our first lease up here in Nashville, I went out and spent the day with the team just to kind of, because they were talking about how busy it was and how chaotic it was. And I was like, let me go see what they're talking about. I can't help them put together an application, but I can make copies of driver's license. Like I can do something.
Yeah.
But really what I wanted to do was observe.
Yeah.
And we had two people that were, so compassionate with the people and great, really customer service driven. And then we had this one lady that was just a bitch. She was just awful. And so 5:00 came and I said, guys, we're going to close the office and let's talk. And she was like, well, it's time to go. And I said, we're going to talk.
Yeah.
And I said, I saw a lot of great things here today, but what really bothered me is your attitude when you're working with these applicants. Like, you were hateful. And she said, I don't have to be nice. I mean, they need a place to live. And I was like, you know what? We don't have to do granite. We don't have to do fitness centers and pools and build with brick. And I don't have to spend the time I do designing these. But we are choosing to be different. And we're going to be different in the whole process, not just the design of the apartment community, but in our customer service and how we treat people from the first time that they walk through the door. And she was like, we don't have to do that. And I said, then you don't need to be a part of this team. Yeah. And she's not. The next day, she's like, same thing, was rude again. And I said, beep, your name. We're not doing this. Yeah. And I truly believe that. And I tell every time we have a lease up meeting, I tell that same story because I mean it. Like, yeah, there is a low supply of affordable housing and there's a high demand, but that doesn't mean that we don't get to treat people with great customer service and compassion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm not a quotes person, but my favorite quote of all time is Maya Angelou's, people will forget what you said and they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
It's so true.
And I think standing by that in our communities and, when there's an elephant in the room, addressing it. Like, it's so crazy that this 3-person team that you're referencing had been working together for months, forming this lease up. And these two super compassionate, motivated team members were showing up and being nice and providing that customer service. And they were dealing with this bitch in the office. Yeah. And no one was willing to call her on it. Yes. And get her out of there because we're just also kind of accustomed, I think, in the workplace to dealing with whatever we're given rather than calling the elephant out in the room and creating such a better experience for everyone. Yeah. So I think it's huge kudos to you for being there.
It was also a learning lesson for the other two that didn't raise their hand. Yeah. And I was like, look, if anything, I may not be able to answer your tax credit questions, but I'm going to be here to support you. Yeah. And so if you're experiencing something, like, you've got to raise your hand. I will be here. Yeah. So
I love it. So I want to ask, you've mentioned promoting team members and the fact that internally the best source of candidates that you can get is internal because you know what you're getting, right? And so you're promoting people outside. But that when you, like as in today, you've promoted everyone that can be promoted. So now you're having to start hiring externally. And you and I have talked about where we find those candidates at and going out to to our social media or posting jobs and when that is or isn't working. And then we've talked about actually getting, you and I personally have talked about, and I think we brought it up here, so I do want to bring it up, is actually leveraging referrals and how we can get a base of candidates or exposure to candidates through referrals. And I was actually listening to a book called Who, which was written a while ago, but a huge part of the concept comes from the top grader recruiting process, which is a very structured method for hiring. And which I think kind of goes back to that whole, like, is hiring one of our skills, like one of the skills that we have as team members. And if you want it to be, I think Top Grader is a really great platform to look into. But this platform and this book, Who, say that 76% of new hires at the best performing companies come from referrals. And it's not necessarily referrals internally, it is referrals externally as well. So, having that trusted consortium of business professionals in your network that you say, like, here are my standards. If you ever run into someone like this, give them my business card. Or if you ever run into someone like this, shoot me a quick text or email to tell me who it is so that I can reach out to them. So I feel like referrals are such a really great source for hiring and dealing with this staffing struggle that we deal with. Are you finding any other ways of either acquiring more referrals or anything else in that domain since we're talking about staffing struggles
Yeah.
today?
So I did a big referral program internally
Mhm.
about a year ago and really offered some lucrative referral bonuses, and we got nothing. I mean, I even was like, is
Yeah.
nobody reading the emails?
Yeah.
Like I'm talking about this. Um, I do ask, colleagues in the business world if
Mhm.
they know anybody, and it's kind of like I feel like hiring is such a problem everywhere that it's
Mhm.
almost like if someone knows anybody, they're not going to refer them.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at right now. They're like, no, I'm going to keep them to myself. Um, so no, I'm not doing well with referrals.
Yeah, I know. It's so interesting. We actually got to the point at Fortress where we started telling our team members to just give us names. Like, so we would go to our engineers and be like, I want to know who the top 2 or 3 engineers you've ever worked with are. Just give me names. And
Yeah.
then we would go find them on LinkedIn and start
Yeah.
reaching out to them and just say, so and so on my team said
Hmm.
that you were a phenomenal engineer. Like, if you if you're not looking for anything, do you know any phenomenal engineers who
Yeah.
are looking for something? Just trying to build that referral process. Also, anytime we hire anyone, we like to ask, we kind of slide it in a little sneakily, but we love to ask you, who is the best leader you've ever worked for? Like,
Yeah.
what's their name? And okay, now that you can see that person in your mind, what would that person say was the best thing about working with you? Like, what would that
Hmm.
leader say? And same with like colleagues. Like, who's the best colleague you ever worked with? And what's their name? And what would Sarah say is the best thing about working with you?
Yeah.
And gaining names.
Then you get their names.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a little
Yeah.
sneakily through a certain way. I don't know. For us, like it's so hard right now. I feel like anytime you tap into the job market and you're posting job descriptions, you're generally posting it in a pool of candidates it's a tired pool, right?
Yeah.
It's like that same pool of people who are
Right.
looking versus trying to like find your A players because you and I both know the difference between an A player and a B player is night and day.
It's a job difference. I
Yeah.
mean, your job difference. If you have a B player that you've hired versus the A, like you have more.
Yeah.
I talked to our new recruiters last week about changing our job descriptions
Yeah.
because, I mean, America has an attention span of about 15
Yeah.
seconds. And
Thank you,
so,
TikTok.
yeah,
Yeah.
thanks so much. And so when our job descriptions, when they get, I try to just bullet point mine.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I want. Don't put it in a paragraph.
Mhm.
Please don't put it in a novel
Yeah.
because they're getting to the first 3 lines and then they're done.
Yep.
And so I do think that, we've got to do that shift as well.
Yeah.
When I share something on LinkedIn, I'm like, I am hiring for X, and I put like 2 things about it because
Mhm.
I know nobody's looking past that. They're not
Yep.
clicking on the job description.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's really hard because like you also need to talk to somebody for a while to figure out if they're going to be a good fit. But the attention span is gone again.
Yeah, I know. We've even looked at doing like really cutesy things, like just creating like little ad campaigns about
Hmm.
hiring new team members and just, like one of the ideas that we've had is like tired of working with a bunch of idiots. Like
Yeah.
come join a team
Yeah.
of overachievers, right? And just like trying to get their attention.
Right.
In
You've got to
Yeah.
in the 15-second, or it may even be 10 seconds now.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
like shortening.
Yes.
We're going to get to 1 second.
So sad.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really is.
Oh. Well, Stephanie, I have spent so much time with you that I've had the opportunity to hear so many of your incredible stories over the years. There have been good stories, funny stories. There have been sad stories. There have been like shake your head, that can't be possible stories. But I'd love it if you would take a minute and share one of those stories
Sure.
with us.
I can share a shake your head one and a good one.
Oh, yes.
So we'll do the shake your head
Yeah.
first. We got a building. It's now 2 weeks that is over a year delayed. It's been just a real challenge, and equity is questioning why we haven't gotten this building. It looks finished, all the inspection, whatever. So we finally get the building. We're so excited. My interior designers go in. I'm like, y'all have got to make a special trip to Texas. We've got to get this leasing office. They go in and install everything. Looks beautiful. The next day at 6 p.m., I get a video of 5 leaks coming out of the ceiling of water rushing into the leasing office.
Oh,
This is furniture we bought 2 years ago, expecting delivery then. I mean, we don't have to reorder all of it, but I just was like, we finally got in there, and now it's just water everywhere. I mean, my manager said, "At least I bought extra trash cans."
I love it. I love the bright side.
Yeah, I know. I was like, "Oh, good for you." I can't get the plumber to answer us. We can't get it's not our own GC on this one. We can't get that GC to answer us. There's still trash cans all over my brand new leasing
Oh
office.
my
I got the pictures
gosh.
on the way here. I mean, we've got to order new couches, lamps, rugs, end tables. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
So
sorry. Welcome to
people,
property
yeah, I
management.
know. And then people see like the design part. It's so fun and glamorous, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
also hard.
But a great story. I remember a property here in Nashville opened its doors. Its first building delivered CO in end of March 2020,
Okay.
when the world
Yeah.
was shut down.
Yeah.
And we were like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to move all these people in? Like everybody like 20 people showed up at the office in one day to move in. And my team is trying to like distance them.
Yeah.
Everybody's got masks on. Nobody can hear anybody because we all have 5 masks on. And this one lady, she's taken to her apartment, and she just walks in the door and starts sobbing. And she said, I never thought I'd have granite countertops. I never thought I'd have a washer and dryer.
Yeah.
And, earlier that morning, we were all stressed out about, like, how are we going to get this done? This is so annoying. Like, should we push these off to do only 2 at a time? And at that moment, it makes it all worth it. Like, this lady, like, she cried. I mean, I stress out about picking the granite countertops.
Yeah.
This lady could have cared less what color they were. She just finally had granite countertops.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you leave on that story, because affordable housing is so necessary. We need so much more of it.
Mhm.
You started this conversation talking about the lack of supply and the intensity of the demand around affordable housing. And a lot of times we don't break that down far enough to the people that are impacted.
Yeah.
One of our team members at Elmington Elevates,
Mhm.
our nonprofit that is near and dear to both of our hearts. One of our team members there recently received a raise that was enough to actually allow her and her daughter to move out of living with family members to their own affordable
Oh,
community.
that's wonderful.
Yes. And she was telling me the story, and she's tearing up. She's like, it's just so nice for us to finally have our own space. And we don't break it down enough to get to like the actual humans that are involved. So I love that story. Thank you for sharing it.
Absolutely.
Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for being my first guest. on our
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
podcast.
I'm honored.
Yes, this was a phenomenal conversation. I learned so much from you every time we chat. And
You as well.
I
I
know
feel like
that-
we could chat for hours and hours.
we could. There
Still
was
have more to talk about.
so many things. But I know that our audience is going to love hearing your take on affordable housing, how unique and innovative it is, and your approach to hiring and leading team members and creating the success that you've created. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.